Everyone thinks David's greatest battle was Goliath. It wasn't. Years later, after the victories, after he became king, David faced a much bigger giant. And maybe that's where you are today. Maybe you're facing some giant standing in front of you. Maybe you've just gotten comfortable. Maybe you've stopped fighting. Maybe you stopped being the man that God is calling you to be. Don't underestimate what can happen to a man when he becomes complacent. I'm Mark Osborne, and this is the Valiant Forge, where Christian men come to forge purpose and strength in Christ. I'm going through a series called Broken Men, Faithful God. And today I'm talking about David, King David. Not David the little shepherd boy, not David the giant slayer, David the king. And I'm going to talk about some of the mistakes he made after he became king and how us modern men can avoid some of those same traps. By the way, David didn't become king after he slew Goliath. He spent years running away from Saul before God placed him on the throne. But that's a story for another day. We're picking up David's story in 2 Samuel after he became king. So David already slew Goliath. He survived years of running away from Saul. He's finally become king. The kingdom is established. God has blessed him. And from the outside, life couldn't be better. And that's exactly where the danger began. Success has a way of making us think we've arrived. We stop depending on God the way we used to. We stop being intentional. We get comfortable. And comfortable men become vulnerable men. I've interviewed a lot of men on my podcast at this point. Pastors, authors, business leaders, men with incredible testimonies. And there's something very interesting that I've noticed. Very few of them failed while they were struggling. A lot of them failed after they became successful. Why? Because success can convince us that we don't need to fight anymore. We get out of position. And that's what happened to David. Now I'm going to read 2 Samuel 11:1. It says, "Then it happened in the spring at the time when kings go to battle, that David, the king, sent Joab and his servants with him and all of Israel, and they destroyed the sons of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David stayed at Jerusalem." It's interesting how that begins. In the springtime, when kings go to war, David sent Joab, and David stayed in Jerusalem. They still won the battle. They didn't need David, but that was a time when kings were supposed to go to war. If you know the story, you know what I'm going to be talking about. But when people talk about David and Bathsheba, they always talk about David's lust issue. But this story begins with David staying home when he should have been out fighting. And that's what we're talking about today. How we can avoid complacency. Because when we're supposed to be fighting, we shouldn't get complacent and not fight. We should keep fighting. And what was David before he became king? He was a shepherd, a worshiper, a man after God's own heart. Are you a man after God's own heart? If you are, then don't let yourself get complacent. Don't stay at home when you're supposed to be going to war, when you're supposed to be fighting. David wasn't where he was supposed to be, and that's when he began to drift. When you stop fighting, stop worshiping, and just relax because you need a minute, that's when the temptation begins. When you decide to doom scroll or look at something on the internet that you should not be looking at. This starts with getting comfortable. When you let yourself get comfortable or stop showing up in your marriage, in your family, in your ministry, in your time with God. David didn't wake up that morning thinking, I am going to commit adultery, get someone pregnant, and then go have someone killed. No, he just stayed home, went up on the rooftop, then he saw Bathsheba. Then one thing led to another. He had someone go get Bathsheba, then he slept with her, got her pregnant. But he thought he came up with a solution to that problem, which was deception. He brought Uriah home, told Uriah to go be with his wife, but Uriah was such a faithful man. Uriah didn't want to get out of position. He stayed by the king to protect the king. So Uriah's not sleeping with his wife because men are fighting at the front Uriah was a faithful man, staying in position where he needed to be. So David had to find another way to cover this up. So instead, he had Uriah killed. Think about that progression. The affair didn't stay an affair. It became deception, murder. But, not every sin stays hidden. Nathan confronted David. Nathan the prophet. Then what happens? The child dies. Someone paid, more than someone, a few people, a baby, Uriah. They paid a severe price for David's sin that started with him just being complacent and not being in position where he needed to be. And the consequences of David's action, they unravel through the rest of his life. And it all started because David wasn't there. David wasn't where he needed to be. And the interesting thing about David's story is I can see it in my own story. There was a season in my life where I stopped showing up. I started making little compromises, less intentional about being the man I was supposed to be. I became more focused on myself than focused on God. And the thing is, I didn't have anyone warning me. Most of what I was hearing at the time, and I was choosing to listen to this, was all about my happiness, my success, me living my best life, doing all I can for me to make me a better man for me, nothing for God. I didn't hear any of that at the time. I wish I would have had someone back then who's on a video that popped up in my feed that said, look, you're about to go down a path of destruction, and I want to stop. I want to stop you before it goes too far. Keep fighting. Don't get out of position. Fight when you're supposed to fight. The biggest failures rarely begin with one catastrophic decision. They usually begin when we quietly drift away from God. And I know that because I've lived it. But God's grace, His mercy, and His redemption met me when I was at the worst of it. And that's what happened to David. David's failure wasn't the end. When Nathan confronted David, he repented. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame someone else. He humbled himself before God. If you read Psalms 51, it'll give you a window into what David was feeling at the time. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. David's story gives me hope. Not because there weren't consequences. There were. Not because God ignored David's sin. He didn't. But because God's grace was greater than David's failure. And the same God who restored David is still restoring men today. Like you. Men like you. If you're one of those men who had failures and you feel like it's too late to turn back, it's not. God still loves you. God still redeems your failures, your past mistakes. I'm an example of that. I'm moving forward. I'm recording videos each week and doing podcasts as much as I can and talking to men outside of podcasts and doing ministry in my church because I don't want to get out of position. I don't want to stop fighting. I don't want to become complacent. So let me leave you with a challenge. Where have you stopped showing up? In your walk with God? In your marriage? With your children? In your ministry? Are you becoming the man that God has called you to become? Don't be like me. Don't wait until the consequences force you to wake up. Ask God right now to show you where you've drifted, where you're being complacent, where you need to be. Take a step towards Him, not away from Him. I wish someone had told me that years ago. Don't stop fighting. God isn't looking for perfect men. He's rebuilding the broken ones. Stay strong, stay valiant, keep forging your path, and be blessed.